So we've talked about how to build your hardware budget for next year. So now let's talk about how to build your software budget for next year. Hello and welcome back to the Sam Beast YouTube channel. My name is David Foxen. And as always, before we get started, please don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the content and subscribe for more ITAM, SAM, software licensing, ITAM technology, FinOps, cloud, everything to do with ITAM related content. We have got a lot planned for 2023. Now, we've previously discussed how to build your hardware budget for next year, but how do you actually build a software budget? This is all looking at the software licenses, the SaaS subscriptions, any maintenance and support you have on software, and even some organizations factor in a bit of an audit budget in the event that they are found to be non-compliant and face fines or additional spend to make sure that they are compliant. Very appropriate at the moment, but the first thing that I would suggest that you do is review your big spend vendors for any announcements on price rises. We've seen a lot over the past few months with the people like IBM increasing some products by 24%. We've got Oracle increasing their prices, Microsoft increasing prices, etc., due to inflation and kind of the way of the world at the moment. To do a bit of Googling, a bit of research, speak to your account management team, speak to the vendor themselves, understand what product sets are going to be increased next year. This is obviously going to factor into your budget and your renewals, unless you are a master negotiator and can obviously negotiate that percentage down. But still, it's likely that your products are going to cost you more next year. So get in early, understand what those price rises look like, so that when you're building your forecast for Microsoft or Oracle or SAP or IBM, that you can put that percentage increase buffer in your budget so that there's no surprises when you get the renewal quote through, and there's no surprises to your finance teams, your CFO and your CIO. Next up, I'm a huge fan of internal audits, making sure that users that have licenses actually need them, that they're using them, that they're on the right licensing model, and that you're basically getting the most value for your software licenses and your software agreements that you physically can. When building your budget for next year, you don't actually have to do the audit all at the same time. But what I would do is look at your ITAM technologies, look at your SCCM, your inventory data, or even do an internal audit if you do have the bandwidth to do so, to understand who actually is using the software. If your metering and your usage is saying that people are using it sporadically or not at all, do not factor them in having a license next year. If they haven't used it for a set period of time, but they were a heavy user of it before, understand why. Maybe it was for a specific project and they don't need it anymore, so you don't need to renew their license. Also, when you're doing your internal auditing, have a look at the support contract that you may have or the maintenance contract. Are there any upgrades in that contract? Is that something you're going to have to factor in next year as well to get to your N-1 or N-2 standard that you have within your organization? Again, something to think about. So once you've had a look at your usage, you've maybe even done an internal audit, then you'll get a much better understanding on what it's looking like in terms of the actual usage for the number of licenses that you need to renew next year. Now, I always like to put a little bit of a buffer on top of that, especially if it's a license key or serial number locked software, so that you're not having to have the users wait for 5, 10, 15 days to get a new key, that you've got a couple spare as and when for really important or high justification request cases for that particular license or application. The other is to talk to HR. Very much in the same way that we spoke to them on the hardware, we also want to know, again, that user fluctuation. How many additional people are expected to join next year? How many people are expected to leave? Are there any big projects on the horizon that is going to require more M365 licenses? Or is there a project that's actually going to require you to onboard a very specific new application to your organization? How many users is that new application going to require? What's the licensing model? What kind of support contracts? Is it SaaS? Is it a perpetual license with additional support? Is it CapEx? Is it OpEx? So many questions that you need answered when building your software budget for next year. Project teams, HR, key stakeholders can help with all of this. This isn't just ITAM on their own. Again, what I like to do is look at the market for any change in licensing terms, licensing metrics, support arrangements, support contracts. Kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with the price increases, but has the vendor brought out a new licensing model? Were they previously a device-based metric, but now they're moving to a user subscription model? Has that gone from CapEx to OpEx? Is the pricing going to be slightly different? Is the recharging internally going to be different? Software budgeting can get a lot more complicated than hardware if you're doing internal recharging. And obviously you've got the differentiator between CapEx, a capital expense, or an operating cost, OpEx. Subscriptions are typically in OpEx because it's an operating cost. It's a subscription. You can't depreciate it like an asset. Whereas CapEx, your fixed asset teams, your procurement teams, and your finance teams, they can depreciate it if it's a capital expense. Got to understand all of that whilst also looking at the new licensing models and how that's going to impact your recharging and your budget. Ideally, you're going to want to look at something that's going to improve how your budget looks. So maybe previously you were just buying support for something that's now a subscription. And sure, it may be an increased upfront cost in year 1, but years 2 and 3, it's actually less. You can forecast that in, explain it to your peers, your bosses, your CFO, your CIO to say, yes, the budget's going to be a bit more than last year. However, in year 2 and year 3, it's going to be 30% less than it should be because we moved licensing models, because we've moved commercial agreement types. I mentioned at the beginning about some organizations having a pot of money for any audits. Obviously, audit activity has been high in 2022 and is expected to be high in 2023 as well. Some organizations do like to put aside a pot of money if they're aware of any risks that are already out there on the organization, aka software that they haven't got enough licenses for. Let's just be frank about it. That's what the pot is for. They know that there's a risk. They know they haven't got enough licenses and they want to cover themselves in the event that there is an audit. The ITAM purist in me would say, well, just go and focus on that risk now, mitigate it so that you don't have to do that. But yeah, fully aware that some organizations actually do keep a pot of money for audits. So if you're an organization like that, don't forget to include that in your budget with the inflated prices for the new products and products that may be running within your organization. So yeah, they're kind of a high level overview on doing your software budgets. Like I mentioned before, make sure you're talking to your key stakeholders about any projects that are coming up that are going to require increased usage in certain applications or even net new applications and software licenses to your organization. So you can factor those in the budget. HR for generic growth or decrease in users so that you can again budget accordingly. You've got that audit pot if you're not going to go and mitigate it in advance, which I suggest you do. If you know you've got a compliance risk, go and focus on that. Get an audit, get an internal audit done. If you're struggling, get a third party involved to come and audit it so that you actually spend less money on mitigating the risk than you would in your audit pot. One of the things that we do see happening a lot is people just putting exactly what they paid for last year in next year's software budget. And 99% of the time that never works because of price rises, an increase or a decrease in usage of that particular software or that particular software as a service or that cloud instance. It's not a drag and drop exercise, especially with the price rise increases. So please make sure you're being proactive, doing those audits. 5 vendors, which normally equates to about 80% of your software spend. Get those audits done so that you know exactly where you stand with them. You know exactly how the price rises are going to impact you so that you can forecast that in your budget for next year. And with that, I really hope you enjoyed it. So we've given you tips on your hardware budget and your software budget now. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and like for more ITAM content. Until next time, we hope to see you here again at the Sam Beast YouTube channel. And as always, happy ITAMing.